Okay, I'll mute myself now and over to Denise.
Okay, thank you. Yes, well, I'm just going to talk about half a dozen fragments. I haven't got very long. So half a dozen fragments that I've looked at recently that have caused me to stop and think or caused an extra bit of interest. And three of them are indeed from the Quintana Gate site that Naomi's just explained to us. There's also a piece from Topsham, which we've also heard about this morning. And then there are a couple of pieces from two Dorset villas. So I'm sort of expanding the southwest range a little bit by talking about those. And my first piece is probably the base of a square bottle, which you can see here. This is a very common type, known to all of you, I'm sure, with lots and lots of variations of mould marks on their bases. So it's a piece from down here. And this is a particularly interesting one because it has some very closely packed concentric circles that you can see here. And it also has part of an inscription around it, which is rarer. I was quite excited to see that. And I say it's probably the base of a square bottle because it's always possible that it might be the base of a square jar, which you can't tell the difference when you have bases and side pieces. And here indeed is one from Apt in France, in Avignon Museum, which has been published lots of times and has very similarly spaced concentric circles on it, and also an outward facing name on it there as well. You can see L. Arleni Iapidis. It's published in the corpus of signatures on ancient glasses that I'll be talking a bit about, 3 volumes, 2006, 2011. But none of the letters on this piece match the letters on the Exeter piece. So first of all, I made a cast and a mould of it. And immediately from there, you can see that the bottle has slipped slightly within the mould as it was being blown, which is causing a bit of irregularity around this part of the base, and possibly a slightly bigger than normal gap between two of the letters here. This piece came from late 1st century to early 2nd century context, which is just right for the bases that have these closely packed concentric circles. So on this piece here, we identify the letters E, R, E, C, V. And I went to the corpus of signatures, particularly the chapter written by Jenny Price in the 2011 volume 3, and noted a similar base from Castleford in West Yorkshire. And I wrote to Hilary to ask some details of it. She very kindly sent me a mould that she had taken of their piece, which also comes from a late 1st century context. And on their piece, we have N-D-A-F-E, and they had interpreted that when they published it as the end of a feminine name, with perhaps the beginning of F-E for fake it. And I also sent my inscription to Roger Tomlin for inclusion in RIB. And he had first of all suggested it might be the name Verecundus, which is quite a common name in Gaul and Britain. But because of the feminine ending of the Castleford one, Hilary Cool very cleverly put both bases into a computer program she has, and the diameters of the circles are very similar, so it's always possible that they come from two vessels made from the same mould. It's nice to think so. So playing around with that, we have possibly a female name, Verecunda, fake it. There's a little bit of a gap around on this side for another shorter name, which we postulated might be Julia. And I put quite a lot of question marks there because it's not at all certain. But it's nice to find a female name on a bottle base because there's a sort of growing body of evidence of women's involvement in either the glass trade or the trade of the contents of these vessels. Now, any discussions always go back to the famous big rectangular bottle, one of 2 from Linz in Austria. There were 2 found in 2 adjacent wealthy graves. Naming Sentia Secunda says that she made it, or she makes it, fac it. She may well have been based in Aquileia, and then this bit of the inscription, VITR, might be referring to her even as a glass maker, although there have been arguments for maybe it referring to the contents. And further fragments of these have been found more recently in Romania and Slovenia. But there are other women as well known on glass containers, 10 or more in the corpus of inscriptions. There's a Claudia Italia, who bottles are found in provinces quite close to Aquileia. There's Ennea Fortuna on a stamped ungent bottle. And then Marianne Stern has published articles about a woman called Sarah Padora, who was involved somehow in window glass supply. And then there's a woman's sarcophagus from Aphrodisias in Turkey, which depicts a glass workshop, which may be something she inherited from her husband. So quite wide-ranging bits of evidence, and it's very nice that this Exeter piece fits into that background. We might have found another base referring to a woman involved in this trade somehow. Now, the largest piece of glass from Quintana Gate, the most complete one, was this nice beaker from the early Roman civil phase. The brown mark on it is a soil stain or weathering stain, and it's quite clearly rotary polished. It has two sort of hollow ground bands at the rim and another one further down the base. And I think the base is also ground, actually, rather than a blown additional base. It's not quite complete, as you can see from these pictures, but it is the most complete piece there. And I think it's sort of comparable with these other vessels which had more elaborate cutting between these bands on them, sometimes regular facet cutting, sometimes pictorial ones, as this one from the Caerleon Amphitheatre. But this is the most complete plain one that sort of fits into this background that I know. And it fits into a background of very nice cut glass from the late 1st and early 2nd centuries from a number of excavations that have taken place from the fortress baths onwards. So it's nice to have that as well. One more piece from Quintana Gate is this base of another colourless drinking vessel, and you can see that the vessel walls have been trimmed away, probably with a pair of pliers or something similar, to produce a sort of counter looking thing. It has a diameter of 34 millimetres, and a number of these have been found elsewhere in Exeter in other excavations. I published one from Rack Street in Exeter some years ago, and Hilary Cool has another, one of these two concentric bases, which is still forthcoming when the Princess Hay excavations are published. And many people, including me, have been guilty of calling these gaming pieces or counters or something like that. But I'm sure all the people involved in Roman games would reject them because of their size from that context, because of that. And a few years ago, in Jenny Price's Festschrift, Sylvia Fumpschilling published a nice little paper about the reuse of Roman glass fragments. She was looking at glass from Augst in Switzerland and suggested these might even be bungs to go in the mouths of flagons. She thought that they were round about the right size and the base rings would be quite easy to pick up and put in. I don't know of any that have been found in any context like that, and it would be lovely if because they do turn up regularly on sites, and what on earth were they for? We need to find one with a bit more of a clue as to what they were used for. Moving out of Exeter now to Topsham, there is this lovely bowl, which was found also by AC Archaeology in a mid-2nd to late 3rd century context, so much later than the usual tradition of 1st century polychrome cast and slumped bowls. And we persuaded Naomi actually to publish a brief note about it in Glass News a few years ago, which you can see there, because it sort of goes into a background of later polychrome vessels, which seem to employ more innovative ways of being manufactured than the first century polychrome cast and slump bowls. Jenny Price published a couple, one from Piercebridge, one from Llandovery a few years ago. There was that lovely plate found at Prescott Street in London and displayed for a while in the Museum of London Docksides. And I think this also is just very interesting, and I think more work needs to be done on it. I'd like to take it to our friends, the Roman glass blowers in Crawley, to look very closely at how it might have been made, because you can see here it's much more smudgy, much more marbled than a lot of the first century marbled bowls. And I wonder whether it was even made, reformed out of maybe a first century cast and slumped bowl plate. And the marbling goes right down over the base ring there. So this is a really interesting piece, I think, from a later context, mid-second to late 3rd century, from Topsham. And then the two I mentioned from the Dorset villas, this was one from Excavations by the East Dorset Antiquarian Society, directed by Lillian Ladle. And there was a nice assemblage of vessel and window glass there. But then this tiny piece, less than a centimetre cube, came to me very late because it had been misidentified as another material. And I found it quite intriguing because it's green glass and then it has this little yellow bit in it here. And I wonder whether this is a bit of reused vessel glass. Glass tesserie often turn up on sites, sometimes in quite large numbers, sometimes just one, as here. Now, was this part of a piece of jewellery or the inlay of a piece of furniture, or was it actually intended for a detail on a stone mosaic floor? All very intriguing. And I just wanted to share this one. And one more Dorset villa, Minson Farm Villa, Minchington's, near Sixpenny Handley in Dorset, also the East Dorset Antiquarian Society, and Christopher Sparey Green is writing up this site. And here we have some little glass tesserie, again, absolutely tiny, and what look like offcuts possibly from making these tesserie. And they're quite clearly remade from bits of bottle. And there's one piece of window glass as well that seems to have been cut down. And it was actually found with limestone debris on a floor outside the building, possibly from making tesserie. So again, were they actually making tesserie out of bits of vessels here? Now, larger collections of tesserie have been found and have been identified as having a more industrial use, perhaps something to do with enameling. This again is just an interesting little collection. There are only a few of them, which goes into this background. So I think my time is up, and these are the references to the pieces I've talked about. I couldn't dwell on them because of time. So just a few nice pieces of glass that